The Royal Victoria Military Hospital stood here in Netley for over 100 years. It served through some of the British Empire's most difficult times, yet despite its outstanding beauty in its architectural design, it was feared by many for its strict military regime, and stories of ghosts today have since added to this site's mysterious and interesting history. So why was it built? At the end of the horrendous Crimean War in the mid-1800s, it was decided by Queen Victoria herself that the British required a new military hospital to better care for the Empire's soldiers. Hospitals at the time were dirty, unhealthy places to be. Many died of infection to their wounds rather than their wounds themselves. They were unsanitary, badly ventilated, and often within poor buildings or even tents. You may already know this from the famous Lady with the Lamp, Florence Nightingale, who was pivotal in the change-up of medical facilities. The Queen ordered a search for a site to build the new hospital. But where? A place was eventually decided on the eastern shore of Southampton Water near the ruins of Netley Abbey, which would later become the name of the surrounding village which developed from the introduction of the hospital. In 1856, plans were finalised and construction began on the Royal Victoria Hospital, and it was big. Very big. Its corridors stretched for a quarter of a mile. It consisted of 2 towers on each wing, with one central large water tower in the middle, which doubled as a chapel. The hospital contained the essential things, such as multiple kitchens for each ward, and some less essential things, such as a bizarre museum containing skulls of those from African tribes and other strange Victorian oddities. The hospital did well right from the off. It developed new ways of nursing, and hygiene was much improved compared to previous hospitals. However, Florence Nightingale was not impressed. She disliked the fact that the ventilation was so poor as this made the environment less adequate than it could have been. She also criticised the wards being kept behind the main corridors, meaning that the lovely sea view and natural light was blocked by a separating wall, leaving the wards dark and gloomy. When built, the idea was that hospital ships would dock at the end of a massive pier jutting out in Southampton Water. However, it was immediately obvious that this was not going to work, as the water simply wasn't deep enough for the ships to dock. In fact, on the opening day, it took hours for Queen Victoria herself to be able to dock at the pier just to open the hospital. So what was to be done? This was the Victorian era, and possibly the first other option that came to mind was of a railway. The line was built by the Southampton and Netley Railway Company and opened in March 1866, transporting people to the now developing Netley village. By 1900, ambulance trains were now transporting patients directly to the hospital at a halt built around the back. The halt also consisted of 2 tracks and a shed to hold the ambulance carriages, rather different from the small railway here today. Heavy casualties during the First World War resulted in the station being, for a time, the 3rd busiest in Britain. The pier became purely used for leisure. When the First World War came along, an entirely new large section was built out of huts at the rear of the hospital by the Red Cross. Netley Hospital was now a village in its own right, with an incredible population of doctors, nurses, patients and soldiers. Netley's capacity now expanded to over 2,500 beds. By the end of the war, over 50,000 patients had been treated. During the Second World War, Southampton faced heavy bombing from Nazi Germany, levelling most of the city, including many other historic buildings. Netley Hospital avoided getting hit during the war, and no one really knows why it was avoided, but it could be that Germany simply wasn't targeting British hospitals. This is, however, disputed. By 1944, D-Day preparations were in full swing in the city, along with the entirety of the south coast. The United States military was given temporary control of Netley Hospital, as this was the area in which many Americans were stationed, including Southampton Common, Netley Common, and others. There are even stories of American soldiers resorting to using their jeeps to get from one end of the corridor to the other. However, there were some more haunting things going on at this time. In 1870, the first purpose-built military asylum was opened at Netley under the ominous name of D Block. There are many horror stories of the treatment of patients at the asylum, and many people were abused, similar to most asylums of the time. Treatment included shock therapy and occasionally just being beaten. By the 1940s, the asylum was at the height of its use and focused on finding a cure for shell shock. The mistreatment continued, however, and propaganda was rife, straight up lying about the reform these soldiers had made. Another dark story of Netley is one of Otto Schultz-Forner, who was taken as a POW in September 1914. He died in 1916, despite only having incurred minor injuries. His death remains full of mystery. After the Second World War, Netley became less and less useful. It continued treating casualties who had returned from smaller wars, and in 1956 even housed refugees escaping the revolution in Hungary. However, by the 60s, the building was becoming far too expensive to maintain for the British Army, and after a large fire caused severe damage to areas of the hospital, the decision was taken to close it permanently in 1963. It was left to nature for a small while before it was demolished. The creepy corridors and gloomy atmosphere led to the Jonathan Miller's 1966 film of Alice in Wonderland having its opening scene filmed within the building. In 1966, the demolition took place, destroying over 100 years of history and one of the most fantastic buildings in the area. But not all of it. In a last-minute decision, the chapel section was saved and remains here today as a monument to the hospital. Other buildings still remain too. The old asylum, after closing later in 1978, is now the training headquarters for Hampshire Police. In fact, a lot of our buildings still survive. The office's mess are now private flats, the YMCA is now a tea room, and the pavilion is now, well, a pavilion. And now here we are, in 2018, an incredible country park with an even more incredible history. Even now, the chapel is currently undergoing restoration and modernisation, so future generations can enjoy this building, its stories, and its spectacular views for many more years to come.